Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the April 10th, 2012 meeting of the Downers Grove Village Council. It's my privilege to call this meeting back into order in open session. There are agendas on both sides of the room on the ledges, so if you'd like to pick up a copy and follow along with our meeting tonight, we would welcome you to do so. There will be multiple opportunities for public comment, both on items that are on our agenda for discussion tonight, as well as a segment for public comment on matters of a general nature and items that are not on our meeting agenda tonight. It is customary that we begin our meetings by reciting the Pledge of Allegiance, so at this time I would ask that everyone please rise and join us in the pledge. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Now let's have an open session roll call, please, just because I would feel so lost without it. Please.
Without making sure, please.
Commissioner Rankin?
Here.
Commissioner Barnett?
Here.
Commissioner Newstead?
Here.
Commissioner Durkin?
Here.
Commissioner Walder?
Here.
Commissioner Schnell?
Here.
Mayor Tully?
Here. Thank you very much. That brings us to item number 3 on our agenda tonight, which is the approval of minutes of council meetings. And we have one set of minutes tonight from April 3rd, 2012, our regular council meeting. Are there any changes or corrections from any members of the council? Hearing none. All those, do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Those minutes are approved unanimously. That brings us to item 4 on the agenda tonight. As promised, this is the segment of the meeting where we take comments and questions of a general nature with respect to matters that are not on our agenda tonight. If there are any questions or comments of a general nature, the custom is to come down to the podium, our still relatively new podium, give us your name and address, and we would love to hear from you. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor Tully and Commissioners. Michael Cassa, President of the Downers Grove Economic Development Corporation, 2001 Butterfield Road, Suite 120 in Downers Grove. I'd like to use these opportunities at the start of meetings to make announcements of projects, and pleased to do one tonight. Several months ago, back in the late summer, we were contacted by one of the nation's premier golf organizations and golf store operators, the PGA Tour Superstore. They had made a decision to open 2 stores in the state of Illinois. Schaumburg was one, and they have selected Downers Grove as the other. They're going to be occupying 50,000 square feet in the former Rossi Furniture Store, which is on Butterfield, next to the former Home Depot Expo store. And they're going to be employing 30 people. They are in for building permit. They hope to be open by June. And they've already been in touch with the Downers Grove Area Chamber of Commerce and are going to become an active part of our community. And I think they're going to be a great addition to Downers Grove.
Terrific.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cassa.
Thank you.
Appreciate that report. Good result. Good news. Thank you. Any other questions or comments of a general nature? Questions or comments of a general nature? Questions or comments of a corporal nature? No, just kidding. Brings us to our next item, which is item 5, public hearings. We have no public hearings tonight, so that brings us to our consent agenda. And we have one item that has been moved from the consent agenda to the active agenda. That is item 6D, as in David. Do I have a motion to approve the balance of the consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments from any members of the audience with respect to any of the items on the amended consent agenda? Any questions or comments from any members of the council with respect to the amended consent agenda? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Commissioner Schnell?
Aye.
Commissioner Durkin?
Aye.
Commissioner Rankin?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Commissioner Newstead?
Aye.
Commissioner Walder?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. Consent agenda as presented passes unanimously. That brings us to item 7 on our agenda tonight, which is our active agenda. And, we don't want to forget about that old item 6D, so why don't we take that up first, and we'll make it the first item under our active agenda, and we'll get to the other 3 items on the active agenda. Do I have a motion to award a contract not to exceed $41,555 to NCAP, Inc. in Sycamore, Illinois for Green Street Sustainable Stormwater Program Pilot Project?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments from any members of the audience with respect to this item? Any questions or comments from any members of the council with respect to this item?
Well, I think Nan was going to talk to us about what that was, and that's why I asked that to be pulled, because I think it's an interesting program.
Mayor, this is a good news item, part of our stormwater management program and commitment to infrastructure improvements
And here to provide some information on this exciting project is our Public Works Director, Nan Newland.
Well, I know Nan was feeling left out and was starving for the spotlight, so we appreciate giving you this opportunity to come and tell us about this good news item.
Thank you. I'm happy to provide additional information about this project. It is a new project for us. It was included in the Community Investment Program for this year. It is referred to as the Green Street Sustainable Stormwater. Many people are familiar with the type of stormwater projects we typically do, which are mostly involving draining water away more quickly from property where there's problem areas. This is a little bit of a different spin to it, where there's some areas in the community where they don't have close proximity to a storm sewer or to positive drainage, and this provides a different approach where we're looking to, in effect, create a rain garden on pieces of property, detain the water and help filter it, which helps water quality. This is such a project, and it's being installed on Washington Street, just north of 59th Street. In close proximity to the YMCA is just south and east of this property. You can see it highlighted here in the yellow box. It is a current vacant existing right-of-way, so it's village property. It's addressing a specific problem that was brought to us by a resident. And I have an exhibit here that just shows you it's just we're going to excavate an area, we're going to put in some amended soil, and we're going to put in some wetland planting that's shown on the next cross-section here. We've been working with the neighbors on the design of this. They reviewed it, and we'll be working with them to incorporate it. I think it'll be a nice place for people who are interested in this type of approach to stormwater to be able to come and take a look at it and see how it operates over time, not just when it's first put in, but how it operates over time. And we did take bids on this. NCAP is a pre-qualified contractor with us for stream bank projects, and we feel like they're well qualified to perform this project. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Terrific. Thank you for the presentation. Any questions or comments from any members of the council? Commissioner Schnell?
I do. There was a wetland project at 49th and Glendenning many years ago that was similar to this, but on a much grander scale. And just because of things, it never did really take hold, and it's never really looked good or done what it was supposed to do. How are we going to ensure, or how is the consultant, or not the consultant, but the person, the company who's doing this, going to ensure that this actually takes hold and does what it's supposed to do?
Well, we'll do that through active maintenance. The other property is under the control of the county.
Right, I know.
And there's been some issues with not providing the maintenance that needed.
Yeah,
so
I know
this will
that.
be under our control, and we will.
Okay, so we'll make sure that the plantings take hold and that
Yes.
things go away. And there won't be a mosquito problem or any of those other issues that became.
Right. The contract includes a 3-year maintenance period as well from the contractor, so that'll allow the plants to stabilize, and we'll be overseeing it as well.
Okay. And, you know, as we progress through, after we talk about the stormwater utility, but as we progress through those kinds of issues, can we use this as kind of an educational component where, you know, if someone wants to establish a rain garden or a group of people want to, they can go and we could have somebody talk to them about how it's done and how you maintain it and all those wonderful things. So, you know, there's not only are we spending the $40,000 to establish a drainage facility, but to actually use it as an educational tool for the community?
Yes, that's exactly why, one of the benefits of this project.
Okay.
So is there going to be signage there, or how are you going to create an awareness that we're doing this?
We put in a similar type sign at,
I was waiting for which one of you was going to say that first.
I was looking the wrong way.
It was like the buzzer in Family Feud. It was going to go.
I was hoping to catch Jeff's eye with that, sorry.
I think we
You'll
could
be hearing
do,
more about that later.
I think we could do something appropriate for this site. We just did something similar at our second and Cumner facility that talks about the environmental benefits of the landscaping there, and I think we could do something similar here.
While we're on the subject, Mayor, if it's all right, I might as well just throw it out there now.
Now everybody wants to know what the heck you're talking about. So go ahead.
We all have smartphones in our pockets, and we all have barcode readers on these fancy new phones like Commissioner Rankin just got. I think as I've been traveling around the world, I've seen those QR codes or scanned codes that you see on coupons and on boxes of cereal and all sorts of everything that's out there in the world now. An idea came to me a couple weeks ago that if we start to put QR codes on small signage around a project like this, or at Second and Cumner, maybe even over at Washington Park, that takes that person who scans that code to the link to the village website so they can see a great illustration like this that shows what that project is doing and how it's being used to benefit the neighborhood. It can also be used for a neighborhood project, like maybe in Nottingham, we could have a couple of QR codes to show the progress and link neighbors to the site to see where the project may be in its completion stages. So just an idea. I know Public Works staff is already working on it, and I sent a note to my colleagues a couple weeks ago about starting to look into this. It should be a pretty low-cost option to get a lot of information out there for those who choose to use it. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other questions or comments on this item? Well, thank you for the presentation and giving it its due recognition. Thank you, Commissioner Rankin, for making sure it saw the light of the spotlight. And with that, roll call, please.
Commissioner Schnell?
Aye.
Commissioner Durkin?
Aye.
Commissioner Rankin?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Commissioner Newstead?
Aye.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. Matter passes unanimously. Now, that brings us back to our regularly scheduled active agenda. We have 3 items there tonight, A, B, and C. We'll start with 7A. Do I have a motion to approve an ordinance rezoning property located at 6622 and 6700 Fairview Avenue?
Mayor Tully, I move to adopt an ordinance amending the comprehensive zoning ordinance of the Village of Downers Grove, Illinois, codified as Chapter 28 of the Downers Grove Municipal Code as amended to rezone property located at 6622 and 6700 Fairview Avenue as presented.
Second.
Questions or comments from any members of the audience with respect to this item? Any questions or comments from any members of the Village Council? Roll call, please.
Commissioner Schnell?
Aye.
Commissioner Durkin?
Aye.
Commissioner Rankin?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Commissioner Newstead?
Aye.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. Matter passes unanimously. It brings us to item 7B as in boy on our active agenda. Do I have a motion to approve a resolution to approve the final plat of subdivision for 6622, 6650, and 6700 Fairview Avenue?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments from any members of the audience? Any questions or comments on this item from any members of the Village Council? Hearing none. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Durkin?
Aye.
Commissioner Newstead?
Aye.
Commissioner Rankin?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Aye.
Commissioner Schnell?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. This matter also passes unanimously. It brings us to item 7C on our active agenda. Do I have a motion to direct staff to implement a stormwater utility system in the Village of Downers Grove?
Mayor Tully, I move to direct staff to implement a stormwater utility system in the Village of Downers Grove.
Second.
Are there any questions or comments from any members of the audience with respect to this item? I would be sorely disappointed if there were not. Good evening.
Of course you would. Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. My name is Laura Crawford. I am the president of the Downers Grove Area Chamber of Commerce and Industry, the best chamber in the state of Illinois, by the way. We reside at 2001 Butterfield Road in Downers Grove, Illinois. I sent you all a letter earlier this afternoon, and I'm not quite sure whether you received it or not, so I'd like to take the liberty of reading it to you all tonight. As you consider the proposal of a stormwater utility, the Downers Grove Area Chamber of Commerce and Industry Board of Directors asks that you take the following concerns, all listed within the Chamber's legislative platform, under consideration. Platform item number 1, environment. We support the spirit of environmental laws and the balance of those laws with social and economic realities. The Chamber supports streamlined and simplified environmental rules and regulations that offer maximum operational flexibility, reduced administrative burden and expense to industry, and that do not hinder economic development and job creation. Recognizing that the village's economic reality requires a dedicated revenue stream to provide mandated infrastructure for stormwater management as identified by the Clean Water Act, the proposal as presented complicates rather than streamlines, regulates with no regulatory control mechanism, nor operational flexibility in spite of stormwater best management practices formally implemented by many businesses. It increases administrative burden and hinders economic development. These points were previously cited in the Chamber's last letter on this topic and are addressed in other sections of this letter. Economic development. It's the second item from the platform that we're addressing. And there's 3 bullet points. We promote and protect economic development and entrepreneurship in the region. The Chamber supports ensuring that the Downers Grove region remains a business-friendly area in which to open and conduct business. The Chamber supports government, fiscal, insurance, and employment policies that make Illinois and the region more competitive. There appears to be a collaborative assumption that this new fee is a utility. While this term may meet the definition provided by the EPA's funding stormwater program, unlike other known utilities, it lacks a venue for citizen regulation or feedback, i.e. CUB, a user control mechanism, nor logical or equitable ramification for non-payment. In essence, it is an impact fee, which creates great concern from an economic development standpoint. Downers Grove needs to maintain its competitive edge with the City of Chicago, Oak Brook, Lisle, Naperville, and others. We know that developers factor all fees and taxes into the cost of doing business. However, a competitive analysis is always conducted. Almost all of the surrounding and competitive municipalities have incorporated the Clean Water Act mandates into property tax. An additional fee will either be used to incentivize, which I will touch upon in a moment, or put Downers Grove at an economic disadvantage. Historically, the economic development toolbox, or a waiver of fees, are used to attract businesses to choose Downers Grove. The commercial areas of highest concern or potential are 63rd and Woodward, 75th and Lamont, Fairview area, and Belmont Road. With competition closing in on the wake of Downers Grove, it is anticipated that redevelopment is likely only if incentives and/or TIFs are extended. Should such incentive packages be approved by council, the burden will ultimately shift right back to the residents who have just lost the benefit of a property tax write-off. And businesses will create a trickle-down effect, putting their pricing at a disadvantage. Businesses have, in many cases, already incorporated stormwater best management practices. Their doing so has lowered the burden on the infrastructure, benefiting all residents of Downers Grove. Should you move forward with this proposal, a one-time credit or rate reduction mechanism is an equitable solution. We appreciate this difficult decision and philosophical, political position. Thank you and the village staff for the open forums and education you've provided on this subject. It's easy to recognize that we are all working to achieve the same outcome, the highest quality of life for the great village of Downers Grove. As you have done with all your decisions in the past, we ask that you consider the community as a whole and the unintended ramifications of this proposed utility. And it was signed by myself. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Crawford, and thank you for the Chamber taking the time to communicate on this occasion and on several prior occasions on this important topic. We greatly appreciate it. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Tom LeCren, 545 Chicago Avenue. I want to add my voice as a resident of Downers Grove in opposition to the stormwater utility system as proposed. For one thing, it doesn't really measure the impact a given property has on the storm sewer. And there's many examples of that in your packet that you got. And it, just as a resident, I think losing the tax break and the complicated, convoluted methods which aren't even implemented yet in the discussions about how you're going to create things where you can get a credit for this or that, and how is that going to affect, if I give a credit to this for this one and that one, somewhere that money has to come back, and it seems that the fee then for regular residents would go up. So I'm just adding my voice to in opposition to this system. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Good evening.
Hello, Mayor. Joe Phillips, 4046 Fairview. I don't think the city should do the stormwater utility for basically three primary reasons. Number one, there seems to continue confusion that this is needed to raise revenue. My understanding that because we're home rule, the ability to raise revenue through the property tax is there, so this is not necessary to raise revenue. Two, there's also been some questions at the previous meeting you guys were worried about. When we do get the money, how do we keep the money in the right place? My understanding, the allocation of the property tax allocation, the assessment of the property tax, basically you guys determine where the money's going to go, stormwater, police, fire, whatever the case may be. That money cannot be moved without this council's approval. And so I would just say you guys just need to kind of just do your job, allocate how much money you want to go to stormwater, and leave it there. You do not need to move it from property tax to a utility to do that. That is within the control of the 7 people here in this room. The second main point, so the first point was it's just not necessary to raise revenue. Number 2, is the current process fair? Well, I would argue that the current analysis has excluded about 34 million square feet of impervious space. That is the roads, which I've talked with both the mayor at your last meeting and Dave. Recognize you can't tax the city. You can't tax the city for its own roads. However, those roads are being used for the benefit of the community. We always talk about Downers Grove being a residential community, so inherently those roads should be allocated to the residential base. When you do that, you'll see that this underfunding that the residential is not occurring. I still have not seen that in the analysis. 2, Downers Grove is built out. We're 99, you guys come up with the numbers, I got all the great people here, 99%, 99.5%, how much built out are we? Dave, what numbers do we say?
I don't have that number there, but I agree we're pretty much built out.
Yeah, so I'll give you the very scientific answer of a lot.
A lot, right. Well, if it's a lot, then basically what you're doing is you're changing the rules on the people who built under the previous rules. And you saw some of those letters came to you from the people. So you basically, people have built under one set of rules. You're going to change it, but basically I'm not even sure why you guys want to change it, but you're changing it, but you're really not doing it fairly to the people built out in the previous rules. So I would say that does not meet the fairness test. The third point, the move from residential is overstated. I mean, one of the concerns when you see those documents is that the sense of the residential is really getting killed and more money needs to be allocated to these other entities. Well, I think we have to look here. 1, we talked about the impervious space of the roads. 2, who supports the tax-exempt organizations in the community? Those are the churches, YMCAs, which obviously gave those things, schools. Those are the residents. Who's going to be paying those bills? It's going right back to the residents. So if you're thinking this great shift to this new entity, that's just not going to be there. And the last piece, in the commercial, I think you've talked about it. Well, certainly hopefully a lot of people do come to Downers Grove to shop. A lot of people in Downers Grove shop, and obviously those costs will be just passed on to the consumers in the area. So the second point there is the process, is what you're trying to do fair. I don't think it meets the fairness test. The third piece, which I think is the most important piece of this, it's uneconomic. It doesn't make business sense. As I described in my previous meeting, guys, I spent as a consultant leading utility, consulting for utilities for 23 years. I was a utility executive for 6 years. I've gone through the rate cases. I know what this thing's about. This thing doesn't make business sense. Why doesn't it make business sense? Is number 1, the loss of the property tax deduction. When you look at this, you got to look at this from an entire community perspective. Right now, you're collecting about $2.5 million. You want to go up close to $8 million. Look at the tax impact of that. It's anywhere from $300,000 to $1 million per year you're giving up. That money will not be able to be deducted by the property owners. That money will be losing. We not have it. How do we want to do? How much is going to the state? How much is going to Fed? That is real money going out of the community. It's uneconomic. Number 2, the cost of administering. No program has 0 cost. I think we've so far have indicated a minimum of a 1/3 FTE of a basically the GIS. I think you call it GIS, if I remember right. GIS personnel. 1/3 GIS. That's just the tip of it. We're not talking about the appeal process. You're not going to be talking about all the other stuff that's going to kick in when this thing kicks in. The phone calls. What's this charge of my bill? That's the minimum this thing additional it's going to cost. And the last thing is the cost of startup. These things don't get started for nothing. You know, has already explained that, you know, when you start this utility billing, whether that using an existing billing system or a new billing system, those are real costs. So, in summary, you can raise the money without doing it. 2, I don't think it meets the fair test. And 3, it's costing money. If you guys vote any other way, I'd love to hear your rationale. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Good evening, welcome.
Hi. My name is Horace Databoy, and I live at 216 39th Street in Downers Grove, 60515. I would like to bring to your attention, members of the City Council, that there was a meeting on Water Day in the city of Chicago where 70 water experts from the state of Illinois attended, and they came and they discussed issues that you are discussing before you. The state of Illinois gave $5 million in grants for stormwater reduction and for environment. Let me just give you names of some of the winners. The city of Joliet footing the separation program got $820,000. The city of Elgin, Lord Street Basin CSO, green infrastructure retrofit got $634,000. Village of Riverside green pavement projects got $502,000. Elmwood Park Green Alleys project got $398,000. Footing drain disconnection program got $255,000. Niles biofiltration facility got $202,000. Stormwater retention and infiltration category, which you are discussing, the city of Danville, the Danville High School School got a campus improvement project of $750,000. Alton Riparian Zone Restoration got $510,000. Greenbrier School in the Northbrook School District got $326,000. The Milwaukee Green Development Project, corridor project in Chicago, which is predominantly concrete and is a hardcore city, got $200,000. Green infrastructure projects also in the small category. Sustainable Sites Initiative of the Commonwealth of the Village for the Safer Pest Control Project got $73,000. Beverly Hills Green Parking Lot and Rain Garden got $72,000. City of Aurora Downers Place Biofiltration Project got $69,000. Green Infrastructure BMP of the Illinois State Fairgrounds got $56,000 for water conservation. Nowhere did I see Downers Grove received any money, or I don't know if you guys applied for it. There are several ways that residents of Milwaukee Green Avenue, by education and by using the Illinois State grant, are moving ahead. They are looking at rain gardens, tree boxes, infiltration planters, green roofs, green walls, bio whales, permeable pavement, rain barrels, stormwater use. So there is a lot of things going on, and I don't see Downers Grove in the forefront on this. I saw the presentation that you had here for your village, and that's about it. I don't think by creating another utility, which also requires manpower, it will add to the cost and increase the cost of stormwater. I think education is the best approach, and it is being used by the state of Illinois, and that is what you should do to reduce the cost. When I look at the roof, you are saying that that area of a roof, because it's not built up, but several people who have roofs use that water from the roof from drainage to water their gardens. So that roof area is not really impermeable area. If you really want to help, you can change the zoning laws, so you can, for example, have driveways that drain out stormwater, and even under the driveway it can be used for storing water. And they presented an example at the city of Chicago and the state of Illinois. So I suggest, I think you all have to do a lot of homework before you do this. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Databoy. Appreciate your comments. And rest assured, we have a very active grant department that pursues grants of various natures. I'm not prepared to comment on the status of any of those, but pursuing grants that make sense for the projects we're undertaking and the services we provide and the infrastructure we maintain is a continuing high priority of the village. Good evening.
Hi, Marge Earl, 4720 Florence Avenue. So I was at the resident meeting for the stormwater utility, and by my count, the people in attendance pretty much didn't like this idea. And I think they've pretty much agreed with that. The chamber and the EDC don't want it. The not-for-profits don't want it. The schools will be exempt. The Forest Preserve and Park District will be exempt. So I keep wondering what I'm missing here because I'm not seeing where this really winds up as that big of a benefit to the residents. I don't support this, and I'm hoping you won't either. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Good evening. My name is Jim Mysek. I'm at 1109 62nd Place here in Downers Grove. I just wanted to speak briefly about the fairness of the fee. My understanding is, and again, I apologize, I'm kind of late to the party. I didn't attend any of the earlier meetings. I'm just kind of getting up to speed on it now. But as I understand it, the fees are based on the impermeable space of the property. What it doesn't take into consideration, as best as I can understand, is the ratio of the impermeable space to the open land that's around that property. And give you an example, you could have the same amount of impermeable space and lots of open space around that, the green space. And as a result of that, you don't have a lot of runoff going into the public utilities. Conversely, you could have no open space and all of the water's going into it, but yet the fees are assessed the same way on that. Give you a more specific example, and I was very impressed with the rain garden presentation earlier today. It's going to be a nice experiment. I've had a rain garden unintentionally for the past 23 years on my property. I have a low spot. I've had the village out probably 3-4 times in the last 23 years that I've lived here, and it's been a problem that we can't resolve. My rainwater goes into my backyard. For several months during the year, I have a backyard that is not usable. I've got a split-level home. The top half, that water is going onto green land, green property around my home. I've got one drain downspout that goes down the driveway. So in that case, I don't see where there's equity in the way that the fee is being assessed for property that does not necessarily have the water going off into your systems. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate your comments. Any other questions or comments by members of the public with respect to this item? The motion that's on the table to direct staff to implement a stormwater utility system in the village of Downers Grove. Okay, I'll open up for questions or comments from members of the village council. Questions or comments?
Yeah, I'll go first then.
Commissioner Durkin.
Yeah, my concern is the property tax that we had implemented back in 2008. I believe the dollar amount is roughly $1.8 million. And I was wondering if this item, this dollar amount will be removed if this is implemented. I know it's a conversation I had with the manager, and I just want to make sure that for me to support this, I'd like to have that $1.8 million removed.
For that to happen, what you're talking about is taking the debt service payments on the 2008 stormwater bonds, amount of about $1.15 million per year for the next 30 or so years, 20-some years, removed from the levy and placed into the calculation of the fees. That's something I've talked to many council members about in the last couple of days. The motion on the floor is to implement the stormwater utility as proposed in this report. As proposed, those debt service payments would remain on the property tax levy and have not been shifted to the fees. If that shift were to occur, the fees would be increased by about $2.80 per ERU, or residential unit, and the property tax levy would be dropped by about another 10% or so, about $1.15 million a year. That's a very long answer, and the short answer is no. As proposed, that shift did not occur, but we'd be looking for direction from the council.
In short, to do that, we would be changing the rates or the fees.
Changing the rates and dropping the levy even further.
So can we, if as a group we decide to move ahead with the stormwater utility, I'm just trying to be clear, can changes be made afterwards, or does there need to be a motion now?
Staff prefers that there be clear, direct direction in a motion format tonight, because we will almost immediately go into public messaging and getting our story out there. So if it's the council's intention to change the numbers that have been presented here in this report to reflect the shift that Commissioner Durkin just talked about, we would like that direction specifically tonight.
And just to put a fine point on it, I believe that in the packet on this item, there is a page that actually reflects what the differences would be. Essentially, the system would be the same as proposed in terms of its structure, but the fees that would be charged and how they would be allocated amongst different types of properties based on ERUs would change.
That is correct.
That would be the difference between what, that would be the consequence if your question were to turn into an action item.
And what we'll do tonight, Mayor and Council, is we will actually put those numbers up on the screen here in a few minutes.
Sure. Well, why don't I just suggest this? I don't want to curtail or steer the conversation, but this may be another element of a decision to be made. The first element is whether to do it or not. And the second would be whether there should be any direction given to change the fee structure that's been proposed if it in fact is done. And the only reason I'm raising that is I might suggest that maybe if there are comments about pursuing this at all as opposed to simply doing what we're currently doing, which would be a good old-fashioned property tax increase, then we talk about that and then talk about the structure, see where people are at on that, and then if someone wants to make a motion to adjust, if someone wants to make a motion to amend the motion that's on the table to pursue a different fee structure, we have that information in front of us, and I suspect it'll be up on the screen behind me shortly. We could, if there was interest in doing that, we could pursue that route. Does that make sense? Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't want to stop you, Commissioner Durkin.
No, I mean, I would support this, but I won't support it with the $1.8 million still in there.
That you would like to change the fee
Correct.
structure. Understood. Understood. Commissioner Barnett?
Thank you, Mayor. This is a pretty big deal, and as it sits right now, as proposed, my understanding, Dave, correct me if I'm wrong, there are a couple of points which I think I can't support as it stands. One is the issue Commissioner Durkin brought up, because this is, we can certainly arm wrestle over fee or tax, but this is a new bloodletting of our residents, if you will, that we're going to do one way or another. I believe all 7 of us have said we intend to fund these things at the levels which we believe we should in the future, the question being how. And there are 2 parts of this. I don't like the idea of leaving property taxes, some of it in the property tax. I think it works against transparency, it works against clarity, it works against sort of basic understanding of what we're doing. And then I'm concerned about the rate. We have such an upside down position right now on our stormwater, streets, stormwater, lots of other things, maintenance, that the current proposal suggests that we increase future rates to try and hit a catch-up point sometime about 10 years down the road. And that means big-time increases each year, 15% or so. And so in addition, that to me is too fast. I think it's too much catch-up in too short a time. And so I can't support that short time period either. I think I've heard some discussion from several of my colleagues over the last umpteen months about the idea of maybe changing that time period, which certainly has some appeal to me. But as it stands right now, it feels like a big new tax in too short a period that I'm not sure that I like the clarity and transparency of. So at this point, with what's presented, I'm not supportive of it.
Commissioner Schnell.
Excuse me. I don't think anybody likes a new tax, and in addition to the residents who are in the audience, we're also taxpayers, so whatever we decide, we're all kind of stuck with whatever we decide on. The bottom line is, as I think I said a few weeks ago, is we have a $3 million deficit just to keep things going the way they should be going that we can't do because we don't have the $3 million. So one way or the other, we have to find a way to bridge the gap, to find that money, to just do unfunded mandates that are being told to us that we have to do. We either increase our property taxes or we find another or fairer way of doing it. As I've said before, I've never been a huge fan of the utility, but I think that the reports that our consultant has presented to us and the educational process that we've gone through and the information that we've reviewed really has swayed my mind that in many respects this is much fairer, simply because it's not just on the burden of the residential community, but it spreads it out to all segments of the community, so that people who may be contributing more than a residential unit will be paying for some of that contribution. I guess I'm going to be in a minority here, but I think that the proposal that staff has presented, that actually has been going around for the last 3 months or so, actually to me makes the most sense. One, from a transparency point of view, it's the plan that's actually been presented to our residents. It's a plan that's been discussed in all the residential business meetings that we've had. Up until a week ago, it pretty much was the plan that I thought we were all discussing. So I don't like doing things, I don't like changing things at the last minute, because I don't think it's as transparent, if you want to use that word, as it should be. But the bottom line is it's on the table right now. I think that the original plan, which keeps the $1.8 million in property taxes and then establishes the utility to help pay for the monies that we need to maintain this system, addresses some of the concerns that were brought up at the meetings that were held, the educational meetings that were held. One of the complaints that we heard from the residents was the fact that a utility cannot be taken off of their property taxes. By a hybrid system that is keeping the debt payments on the property tax that was passed in 2008, that allows that 1.8 component to be taken off of the residents' property tax. But it also allows the utility to move forward, and those monies would not be able to be taken off of your income taxes. So it's a hybrid system. If you look at the list of utilities in the state of Illinois, the majority of them, to my understanding, are hybrid systems. And I think for the reason that some of it can be taken off of your income tax and some of it cannot. So from that perspective, I think one, it's a thing that's been sold to our residents, or not sold, but that's been explained to our residents. I think it addresses the concerns of our residents as far as at least getting some sort of a tax break for some of the fees that they're paying. And I don't know, it's the fees that are associated with it for, and I guess Mike's not going to be able to get it up, but for a Tier 1 home, in 2013, the fee would be $420 without the 1.8, and it would be $630 with the 1.8. That's a big difference, and the difference becomes greater. Now, see, magic. The fees seem to be considerably larger with the 1.8, and I know that residents will not be paying the property taxes. My concern is what the Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away, the Lord can also take back again. And I'm afraid if we, stop paying those property taxes, it may just be that much easier to install them for some other reasons in the future. And that does concern me. I agree with Commissioner Barnett and I think Commissioner Durkin in that the amortization period needs to be longer. I don't think 10 years is sufficient. At a minimum, I think it should be 15 and perhaps even 20. Because it is something that people are going to take a hit at. Obviously, we have to get to that point, but it's taken us a long time to get to this point of not having the funding. And whatever we decide to pass, I think it should be in there at a minimum that it's 15 years and perhaps can be looked at by future councils to make sure that the burden is not so bad on the residents that it's not something that they can handle. I don't think anybody likes new taxes. I know I don't. But from my perspective, this spreads the burden over the entire population, both commercial, residential, and not-for-profits, et cetera, throughout the community. And it seems to be a much fairer way of doing it. But as I said, I just have a problem not addressing some of our residents' concerns that came through at the meetings, which was to at least have part of it being able to be taken off their taxes. So that's the only argument, is not supporting that particular idea, so. But I'm open to listen.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Waldeck.
Thank you, Mayor. Hey, I'm working on this from the perspective that it's decision night, and that's the way it was presented, so I don't know if this is going to be a hybrid night or what, you know, if we're going to have changes or, but I was ready to make a decision, and whatever decision's made, I first want to say that I want to thank staff and our consultants for providing certainly enough information and trying to get the word out to the public as to what we were trying to do, so we're going to try and make the best decision we can. And then for my decision, I made a few comments in the process I'd like to address real quick. One was a comment on a referendum. I thought of it one night, and I don't look at a referendum as being an abrogation of responsibility. You know, like when you go to the grocery store and the bagger asks you paper or plastic, they're not abrogating responsibilities, they're trying to be customer friendly. Probably more appropriate in this case is a store clerk asking cash or charge. So I think it'd be appropriate. I doubt if anybody wants to go that way, but I thought I'd bring that up. A lot of comments on mandates, and it doesn't apply just to stormwater, but it applies to a lot of mandates we get. There are mandates, and then there are mandates, and we keep hearing that word. You remember, locally we had a mandate. It was called a sign ordinance. It was originally set for 7 years, and a lot of people went out and you know, changed their signs and made the investment right away because they were good corporate citizens. But what happened was with the mandate was, if you ignored it, well, you're getting a 2-year extension. What was originally unfunded is now partially funded. And why do I bring that up? Well, in November, we may have one group in power that promotes the environment. They're pushing the environment. They realize that there are a lot of mandates out there, that a lot of entities are in financial trouble, so there'll probably be extensions and grants and those types of things, so there'll be opportunity, or stimulus money. On the other hand, in November, it could be a group that gets in power that doesn't like the environment, doesn't like mandates, won't enforce anything. So, I mean, is it wise that we rush into getting all this work done if it's, you know, I think we need to approach the mandate issue with caution. 10 years ago, I was concerned about 3 major factors when we were talking about the stormwater utility. One was creating a huge, costly bureaucracy. Secondly was a complex and inaccurate measurement of impervious area. And thirdly, the loss of tax advantages by switching from a tax to a fee. The bureaucracy issue is not a major consideration, but I do have doubts about ongoing enforcement and fairness. Can we keep up and enforce fairly for the long run in this new system? And I do have some doubts in that area. As people make changes, are they going to get the proper changes reflected in their billing, in their system? Next of all, theoretically, either way, whether it's a tax or a fee, there'll have to be a way to pay for the work that needs to get done. And the mayor commented, the mayor was right. While in theory it works either way, property taxes might leave stormwater as an issue du jour, I think was the term, and may become underfunded when other priorities come into play. The loss in the tax advantages by switching to a fee should be made up by having groups that never paid before. That sounds good. They contribute to stormwater. They have to pay. More people paying reduces the individual bills, in theory. Theoretically, it does make sense. But from a practical standpoint, the reduction in taxes are usually followed by, and I think Commissioner Schnell kind of alluded to this, a reduction in taxes usually is followed by an increase in taxes at a more rapid rate. Councils will compare taxes and increase the property taxes to meet other issues du jour. So taxes will eventually work their way up. And people pay attention to their property taxes more than they do to fees. So they'll make elected officials more accountable. Officials should do the right thing for public service and not worry about the next election or the future, or a future in politics. it's easier to increase fees under the radar than it is to increase taxes. The idea that entities who are not paying now will have to pay is enticing. However, even before we start the process, we're beginning to institute a variety of exceptions. Already, we're beginning to see a creation of a special interest groups, something that will probably come up later in a later agenda item. The Park District is telling us that they mitigate more water than they're responsible for. The schools are saying that they just put it on taxes or fees. They even get a break for teaching about stormwater. The idea of charging other taxing bodies fees is to help improve their behavior and give them some accountability. Not-for-profits are already under attack, and their public services will be impacted by increased expenses. So businesses can't complain that it will hurt them as well. We heard from the chamber, probably very well better put than I could explain it. It'll hurt them as well, and might just pass on to the cost to the public anyway. And then how long before XYZ Corporation wants to decide whether they're coming to Downers Grove or not, and they're going to be looking for some kind of a deal to either directly avoid the stormwater fee or something else comparable. So the loss of the tax advantages by widening the pool of pays is affected so that every dollar credited the other groups just increases the fees back to the original tax-paying group. Taxing bodies threaten to increase their taxes or fees, businesses pass it on to the consumer, so now from a practical standpoint, the original taxpayer group will be more likely to pay higher property taxes and ever-increasing fees. Suddenly expanding the paying universe isn't as attractive as it was when you start carving out exceptions. As I said, people pay attention to taxes and those issues. Under the stormwater plan, there's a little discussion about a proposed $7 million bond issuance. So now we're not talking about a $10 million bond and a $25 million bond, but another $7 million in stormwater. That's $42 million in planned borrowing in just a few years. That's $23 million in interest alone. So theoretically, while a stormwater utility may be a good approach, I think that looking at it from the practicable standpoint and the direction we would be heading falls short of being good for the taxpayer. And as presented, I probably will not support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Newstead.
Thank you, Mayor. We're hearing a lot about stormwater utility. We've heard a lot over the last number of months. Some of the things I want to highlight are that it is a dependable and reliable source of revenue for the much-needed infrastructure improvements that we all know we need. We have made a lot of infrastructure improvements since the 2008 bond was issued. We do have more work to do, but then we also need to maintain those infrastructure improvements that we've made and the existing infrastructure that's been in the ground for hundreds of years. The stormwater utility will help us with our long-range financial planning. It has a dedicated funding strategy that we can use and plan for the future. A reduction in the property tax will be realized by all property taxpayers if we go with the proposed plan here. The distribution of the payment, as we've heard from Commissioner Schnell, is a little bit more broad and fair. All users, and we all do use the system, whether or not we're churchgoers or a church, school, everybody who's in Downers Grove right now has benefited from the stormwater system. There is a credit system in place that allows folks to continue along with best practices and conservation and processes on their properties. I think I'm hearing from my colleagues tonight that there's a couple of things still left undone even after all of our discussions, and I know we're to make a decision tonight, but I'm hearing the amortization period and then the inclusion of the bond issue in the utility. I know that that does change the numbers a bit, but I think we do need to give that clear direction tonight to staff. And if a motion needs to be amended to include those two things, we can make that. But I do agree with the amortization being extended. 15 years or more is fine with me. I do like the idea of adding the bond debt service into the utility, so all the stormwater is in one fund. It's taken care of. It's all together. And part of what I'll call a stormwater function, even though you don't use the word function in our financing, but I use it in a different life. So I'm interested to hear what the rest of my colleagues have to say, including the mayor. And, I think that this is a new path, and change and newness in our village are two things that don't always have a lot of support. We didn't have anybody come in here tonight to say they do want to impose a stormwater utility, but in conversations and in emails, we have seen folks around town say they do see the benefits of it. Many of them are engineers, I will say that. It's kind of a joke, sorry. But realistically, there are folks out there that see the benefit of having utility. And I think once we enact the utility, we'll find what usually happens in DuPage County is other towns, to the economic development point, do follow along with what we do. And we will be innovators if this does take foot, and people will be knocking on our village hall front door to see how we did it and to see how it works. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Rankin?
From the beginning, I wasn't a big fan of the stormwater utility, but after all the presentations and all of the information that we were presented, a couple of things came to light. We can't continue to ignore our infrastructure in our town. One of the statistics that really struck me was that our stormwater mains are on a 220-year replacement cycle. That's unacceptable. They highlighted that the recommended level would switch that to a 100-year replacement cycle. But MFSG, our consultant, said we really should be at a 60 to 80-year replacement cycle. As a council, we've all agreed that we need to address the funding gap. The question is how to fill it, by creating a stormwater utility or raising property taxes. Both choices aren't without flaws. I've heard feedback supporting both options. The unfortunate part is that both options result in people having to pay more money for stormwater. I support creating a stormwater utility. I think it creates more accountability and is more equitable to all. All of our properties contribute stormwater to the system, and we will all benefit from the improvements to the infrastructure. Like some of my colleagues have said, I too do prefer removing the 08 bond debt service from the property tax. I think it makes more sense, it's more logical that it's all there. If we're going to create a stormwater utility, I think it should all be together. On this graph, Mike, can you pull it up just a bit? Because the net impact between Tier 1 residential, Tier 2, Tier 3, that's the annual net impact difference, right?
We want to make sure.
Last column.
We want to make sure we're talking about the same numbers.
Down the net impact of removing the 08 bond issuance and the property tax reduction that would occur because of that. We're talking about a difference between $1 to $6 per year, if I'm understanding those figures right.
Commissioner Rankin, you're talking about these net impact here, right?
Yes.
Okay. This table, I think you're correct. What this does is this takes a Tier 1 residential property, and it shows under the original proposal what the fee would be annually, $50.40, what their property tax reduction would be, $30.61, and a net impact of this property of just under $20. This down here shows the proposal that was just framed up earlier tonight by Commissioner Durkin and others. You can see that the fees would go up. Annual fee now about $75, but the property tax reduction would go down even further, about another 10%. And so the net impact on this property on both proposals is relatively similar, 1979 versus 1837.
So it changes between the Tier 2 and the Tier 3, but it's not significant that would prevent me from saying, well, we said we were going to do these types of fees. It's not, I don't think it's significant to a homeowner.
Yeah, I think the impact of the switch would be more to the properties that are currently tax exempt.
And then I also prefer extending the roll-in period of the rate increases. I think that's a great recommendation. And the other thing that no one mentioned, but I would like to see, is that there would be unlimited incentives during the first year when people apply for the incentives, the residents. There was a cap on the amount, and I think for that first year we should allow it to be open so that everyone can take advantage of that. That's all, Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner. The village manager made a comment to me earlier today that, I don't know if this is true or not, but we first started talking about the possibility of a stormwater utility, what, exactly 10 years ago tonight, more or less?
Pretty close, yes, sir.
This has been a long conversation, certainly no rush to judgment, and I think I commented at one point in time that this was an innovative idea. It was really innovative 10 years ago. It may not be so innovative today, but it sure is innovative in Downers Grove, and it sure is innovative in DuPage County. And I think, as one of my colleagues said, anytime you do something different or new, there's going to be a discomfort level with it because it is different, it is new. It's easier to do things the old traditional way. And that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with them. It's just that's what you're used to. There's really three, and there always have been, three issues to be decided. And I think two of them we have to decide tonight. Well, I think one of them we've already decided. Of the other two, one we have to decide tonight. The other one, I think we need to decide in some fashion, to some degree. The first issue is whether or not we're going to continue to invest in our stormwater infrastructure, and whether or not we're going to grab the bull by the horns and wrestle down and solve a funding gap that we know that exists. In all the time that we've been talking about an actual stormwater utility implementation, and we've been at it with the consultants for what, over a year?
Yes.
So we've been talking about it for 10 years in concept. And I think we had the Stormwater Utility Exploratory Commission, we had the Stormwater Master Plan, we had the Watershed Improvement Plan. We've had, this is a long time in coming. And now this is the last piece of it. And we've been at that last piece for over a year. At no point in time have I heard from anyone that we shouldn't actually take the bull by the horns and solve the funding issue and invest in our stormwater infrastructure. No one has suggested the contrary. So with that presumptive conclusion, then the question simply becomes, okay, how are we going to pay for it? And that then comes back to the comment I made about we could either do it the traditional way, which is we simply increase our property tax levy. I guarantee you if we had a series of public meetings and we got people there and we told them we're going to be raising your property taxes X amount, I guarantee that most people in the room would be against it. I guarantee that most people would get up here tonight and they would say don't do it. It's just the nature of the beast. So we're going to do something to solve this funding gap and invest as we should in our stormwater infrastructure and our maintenance. That's going to happen. And what we're trying to decide tonight is whether we do it by simply raising property taxes and other existing revenue sources, or do we do something different, something innovative, which is implementation of a stormwater utility, which can come in many different flavors. And that's really the next issue, is what flavor do we want to have for Downers Grove if we go forward with this. I mean, I've been thinking about this topic for 10 years and really been thinking about it hard for the last year or so, and have listened and heard a lot of different perspectives, and I think that the proposal that's on the table tonight reflects a lot of the input and comments and whatnot. And this isn't it. This isn't carved in stone, folks. This is, if we approve going forward with implementing a stormwater utility, what we're actually directing staff to do is to work out the final details. And some of those can be worked out, but direction needs to be given to allow those details to be worked out. Simply saying go and off and do it is not sufficient. But it's not carved in stone. I mean, there are adjustments that can be made even after we implement a utility system. There are pros and cons to both simply putting this in the backs of the property tax or going the stormwater utility route. The pros of a stormwater utility are as follows. It is a more sustainable and dedicated way of paying for stormwater maintenance and infrastructure. No question about it. It's a dedicated source. It is a more sustainable source because, like the water system, it is tied to the specific issue that you're trying to deal with. So if anyone wants to know whether this can work in a manageable way without all the concerns about a bureaucratic Frankenstein taking off, and we have a water distribution system right now and have had one for a long time that pretty much works on a similar model. So it's not that difficult to imagine what this would look like. That's not to say that there won't be startup issues and whatnot. There always are with any time you do anything new. Another big advantage is this is a more accountable way of going about it, because the money that comes in is directly tied to stormwater runoff, and the money that is paid out is directly tied to stormwater maintenance and infrastructure. So from a accountability, or if you want to say transparency standpoint, it is superior in that respect. Whereas just paying for it out of the general fund on the property tax levy, I challenge you to figure out where that is being paid right now. Under this mechanism, it would be more accountable. Third, it is more equitable, and it's more equitable in a few different ways. Number one, as was mentioned, it's a better distribution of the burden of paying for maintenance and infrastructure of stormwater. More people contribute to the burden that we all have. It benefits everyone, so this system better allocates the cost to more people and comes closer to more people who actually benefit from it actually contributing to its cost than under the property tax system. I think the numbers that have been sent around, or I think I've said them probably more than anybody, is under the current system, I believe, residential property owners account for 46%, approximately 46% of the impermeable area, and yet they're picking up approximately, I think it's 75 or 76% of the stormwater burden. This smooths it out more. It's more equitable. It's also more equitable in the sense that it has a much closer relationship to the problem you're trying to solve than property taxes do. Does this perfectly measure every drop of water that runs off of a particular property? No. Can it? You wouldn't want to have a system like that. That would be the bureaucratic nightmare, the Frankenstein that people are concerned about, because you'd literally have to go out there to take it to a hyperbolic extreme. You'd be measuring every drop off every blade of grass. Can't do that. But there's absolutely no relationship between property taxes and stormwater runoff. Zero. This is a lot closer of a nexus, a much closer nexus between impermeable area classified as it currently is proposed to be classified amongst commercial, residential, and so on, than property taxes. Because there's no relationship between the value of a property and how much stormwater it generates. So in that sense, this is more equitable. It also is more equitable in the sense that, yes, you can actually do something to reduce what it is you would pay in the amount of a fee. And again, I understand that there are differences of opinion in terms of how much of a credit you should get, who should get the credit, and what should qualify as a credit. I understand that. That's where we get into the flavors of the ice cream. What should this particular stormwater utility look like for Downers Grove? And those are some of the details that we would have to work out. A number of them have been proposed, but again, they're not fixed in stone. But certainly, those credits make it more equitable, because you can't do that right now with your property taxes. If you do some on-site detention for stormwater in your property right now, you're not going to get a property tax reduction. Now, you may not care, because when I get to the cons, we'll talk about the property tax deduction on your taxes, which is another issue. Credits also do another thing, and that is it promotes good practices. Because if there's an incentive to actually manage your own stormwater better than you otherwise would have to, and I understand that some people have to manage their stormwater regardless. We do have a stormwater ordinance from the county, and there are development issues that have to be accounted for. But more generally speaking, this is a system that promotes good practices, better understanding, and better conduct when it comes to stormwater management and best practices. So those are all the pros. And there are also grant opportunities with respect to stormwater costs, whether you have a utility or a property tax payment system, and there might even be some advantages to seeking out and obtaining grants for stormwater if you have a utility in place. I don't want to get over my skis on that point, but I believe that that may be the case. What are the cons? And there are cons. Cons are, of course, that this is new. It's something different. We've got to start something up that doesn't exist right now. We don't know how it's actually going to turn out, but I think we've thought it through pretty well, and I have high expectations that if this goes forward, it'll work out pretty well. It might need some tweaking down the road, but I, again, challenge folks to find something that doesn't. Another con is, yes, this is also the pro. The pro is everyone pays. The con is everyone pays. There are people right now who don't pay for stormwater through a separate dedicated source that would under this system. Shockingly, they're not in support of this system. I understand that. No one wants to pay something they currently don't pay. And third, this is a con that there's just no workaround, which is the property tax reduction. You can deduct property taxes from on your income, at least until federal government decides to change that. And you cannot deduct a stormwater utility impact fee from your property, your income taxes. That's a con. How that translates out in the long run, I'm not so sure, but yes, it's a downside. So on balance, I've been convinced for some time that if properly designed for Downers Grove, and that's where we get into the details, that this is on balance a superior method of paying for stormwater infrastructure and maintenance costs. And I also am confident, in fact I know for a fact that there are a number of communities in DuPage County that are watching this very closely, and I wouldn't be surprised that within 5 years from now, if we go forward with this, you're going to be able to count quite a few other communities in DuPage who have done the same thing. Because Downers Grove, we are in fact known as innovators and leaders. So then the third issue is the details, and I don't mean to downplay or minimize the importance of these details, because they include things such as, well, how much should the fees be and what should they account? Should we go a hybrid system that leaves some of the cost on the property tax roll and the rest on the stormwater utility, or should we go all the way and take all the current debt from the 08 bond issuance and put it on the stormwater utility and offset that with a reduction in property taxes? I know that when this was originally proposed, I think the thinking was, well, this is new, let's ease into it, so we're going to ease into it in two different ways. One, we're going to ease into it by starting off with a hybrid, and then number two, we're going to have an amortization over time so that it ramps up over time. And I understand that. We could have just as easily said, let's treat it like a light switch and go right to it. And if I'm hearing and understanding what some of the comments of my colleagues have said, is that they would like to change how quickly we jump into the pool. Some would like to jump a little bit deeper. Some would maybe like to wade into it a little bit longer over time. I don't have a problem with that, because I'm of the mind that I think, again, the utility is the superior way to go on balance. If we want to jump into a little bit further, shift the 08 bond over into this now as opposed to the hybrid system, I'm okay with that. What it means is it's a bigger hit sooner, and if the amortization is over a longer period of time, I don't have a problem with that either, as long as it makes sense and we're not undoing the good that we're trying to accomplish. That's not the motion that's on the table. Someone would have to make a motion to give direction on those points. But I'm open to hearing that, as long as staff doesn't tell us that you can't amortize it over 50 years or something ridiculous like that. I think that's fine, because I think this is the better way to go. And in reality, we would be moving from one point in time to another point. I'm sorry, not a point in time. We'd be moving from one point in this spectrum to another point anyway. What I'm hearing some of my colleagues suggest is that we move just a little quicker over maybe a longer spectrum or something like that. I don't have a problem with that. I'm open to it. I'd like to hear what the specifics are and what staff's reaction is, although I think they've kind of given us what the other option is. I think it's up over my head right now. So I would be in support of that as well. I think those are all the comments I have at this point in time, other than just to reiterate that this has been a long discussion. It's been a community discussion. I'm greatly appreciative of the time that not only staff has spent with our consultants and on their own, reaching out to the public to at least make people aware of this. I'm greatly appreciative on behalf of myself and my colleagues for the amount of stakeholders in our community that have invested their time to become knowledgeable on this topic and have attended the meetings and have shared their comments and input with us, whether pro or con, because it really is a community decision. So that much I appreciate. And regardless of which way this goes, we are all going to be better off for having understood the issue very thoroughly and knowing that the decision was made on a well-informed and eyes-wide-open basis. Those are my comments for now. Commissioner Neustadt.
When does the 2008 bond retire?
2038.
2038.
It just started.
So if we were to, can I make an amendment to my own motion, Enza?
Hang on.
Go ahead. That's a question I had for now. I'll yield the floor.
Commissioner Durkin.
Bob has a question.
I got a question, Mayor.
Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Barnett.
Sean's trying to help me out, thank you. Dave, could you talk out loud a little bit, describe the effect, the practicality of, and the effect of Commissioner Rankin's thoughts about unlimited first-year incentives?
Sure.
What's the effect on?
The effect of an unlimited incentive year, and especially in the startup year, means that there's a higher level of uncertainty as to how much net revenue we will receive. Under what's proposed, incentives would be capped at a certain dollar amount, and it's first come, first serve. So once we set that dollar amount, we know how much our net revenue will be reduced by. If we go to unlimited, there's an amount of uncertainty.
And the current proposal has, in the shift, well, it has an increase in total revenue for stormwater in the first year.
Correct.
So that the 2008 bond service plus the stormwater fee is a net increase as compared to the prior year.
That is correct.
Okay. Yeah, that is another thing that I guess it's a quantum change here, and there's a lot of arguments to be made on both sides that we've heard all this time. But my concern is that if we're going to do this, we do it in a way that is, easily understood, easily digested, not easily misconstrued. And so I'd like to see that that 2008 bond issuance in there. I'd like to see the extended amortization. I'd like to see first year net zero so that people see a shift instead of a shift and an increase. That just gets lost. I mean, I think that it's so easy to misunderstand. I mean, think about how many people right now, still believe regularly that they pay $3,000, $7,000, $12,000, whatever their tax bill is, to the city of Downers Grove. Not the village of Downers Grove. The city charges them $10 grand. And so all these little sort of kind of but sort of asterisk things bother me about it, because this is like the 2008 bond issuance. In order for this to be successful, I think it has to have, all of our residents believing that it's a good idea and understanding it, because all those pros that the mayor talked about promoting good practices and about accountability, and those are only realized if residents really understand what it is that they're dealing with. And I have a lot of fear about that, so that's all I got for now.
Well, to your point, one thing that we'll definitely, if this goes forward, we'll have to brace ourselves for is that increased accountability will spark I think, a recognition of something that currently is kind of buried in a line in a property tax bill. Whereas if it shows up separately on, say, a water bill, it's you want to talk about accountability. It's going to be right there in black and white, flashing letters.
But that's good.
Well, it's I think going to generate quite a stir initially, but it's putting it out there in big, unmissable letters and numbers, not letters, numbers.
But it also gives the residents an understanding of how much money we are actually dedicating to this.
That's right.
And right now, I'm not sure that everyone has a clear understanding as to how much money we're putting into stormwater and how much it's actually costing us to just maintain a very old system and not replacing and maintaining things.
Right. I mean, I think there'll be as much shock value from seeing it broken out for the first time, but then eventually it will turn into, well, now I see what it is that I'm paying. I want to see where it ends up. You have to be putting a lot of those codes around town so people can actually track where their $10 went.
I have a question there. I have two questions. First is, if we were to remove this $1.8 million, or the 2008 property tax portion, and put it into the stormwater, will this action have any impact on our current renewal of our rating? Because this was in place before the rating.
The proposal was the 2008 bond, obviously in place before the current rating. The proposal was published before our rating. And when we met with S&P, they talked about our efforts to achieve sustainability and infrastructure. And generally speaking, these types of steps are viewed favorably by rating agencies. We did not present the question of if we modified the proposal and shifted the 2008 debt service payments from a property tax based to a utility base. All that being said, The 2008 bond issuance is and will remain a general obligation of the village, which means we always pledge our full faith and credit, which means that if for some reason these fees don't generate enough to make that debt service payment, we will have to levy for it. So I believe that generally these shifts are viewed positively by rating agencies, and knowing that it's a GO, a general obligation, means that it should not significantly affect our position.
Okay. All right. The other question I have for you, Mayor, is since there seems to be a majority of us willing to make the changes, do you want to continue discussing it, or do we go ahead and make a motion? I unfortunately do not have my Robert Rules book with me, so I'm willing to attempt it.
That's why we have an attorney.
Okay.
Well, we can discuss what the motion would be, which might make sense before it's made.
Okay.
And then the procedure is to make a motion to amend the motion that's on the table that has been made and seconded. And then there would have to be a second for that. And then we would first vote on the amendment, and then we would vote on the motion as amended. I remember.
So if that's the case, then what I would recommend, if we were to make a motion to amend the motion.
Well, we can talk about what the motion would look like before making it, so
All right,
don't feel like you need to jump right into the deep end.
2008 property tax removal, put it into the stormwater utility fee, and move the amortization from 10 to 15.
Let me ask you a question. What's the impact of the change in the amortization? That's something I haven't.
The change in the ramp-up period, if you will, whether we ramp up to recommended service levels in 10 years or 15 years, is more of a planning level document. And while it's important for public messaging, it's a lot less important from staff's perspective than year number one, what are the fees? Each year, this council will make a decision on how much to adjust the fee going forward. So whether the plan says we're going to ramp up in a 10-year period or 15-year period is less important to us as staff than understanding what will these fees be in year one.
Do we want to consider including Commissioner Rankin's idea of removing the cap for incentives in the first year, in 2013? In that motion amendment? So it would be 3.
Or is that something that can be decided later?
That one, I think, is one of the details of when we, if there's a yes vote to direct staff to do it, we could show you the impacts of that when we bring the ordinances forward.
Yeah, can we do that?
I think
mean, I don't have a problem supporting it,
Yeah, I think
but
that's
I don't want, it's an unknown.
I think that goes into more in the fine-tuning of the credits.
Yeah.
I think we can address that.
Those are not large dollar amounts at stake from what staff can ascertain from the report.
Commissioner Wallach?
Thank you. While we're talking about amending motions and all that, the original motion is whether we're going to have a stormwater utility or whether we go back to the old way. And I think it made my point clear. But if you amend the motion, then I'd be voting if, suppose, let's say I'm the only one who opposes the stormwater utility. The stormwater utility goes through, but then I'm also not weighing in on the various details that we're presenting right now. Presents a bit of a quandary.
No, I think you can just, I mean, there's a motion on the table, there's a second, we can have all the discussion you want, including the type of attributes you're talking about, including the details of what might be put forth in a motion. I think the reason why we're trying to work out these details is because I think staff, there's a certain level of direction that would be very crucial right now if it were to go forward. And I think whether or not the 2008 bond issuance moves over to the stormwater utility or not is very crucial because it affects first-year fees.
Correct.
Which is important for messaging, which goes back to what people understand is happening. The amortization, what do I keep calling it? The ramp up.
I call it.
Yeah, sorry.
Just following your lead, Commissioner.
Sorry.
The ramp up is less important, but I think that's also something you probably want direction on. So I guess if there's anything else that is of that directional level, that probably ought to go in the motion unless there are any issues with it.
I might. To Bill's point, though, the process of voting on the amendment and then voting on the motion allows any of us to suggest that if I don't like the idea of utility, but if it sounds like it's going forward, I'd like to affect some change in how it goes forward. That's really afforded by the process of voting on the amendment first and then
Correct.
It's
Correct.
important.
I mean, you could vote in favor of the amendment, but vote
Absolutely.
against the amended motion.
And even propose other amendments that get
Yeah,
successfully
well, that's what I was trying
passed,
to- that's what I
successfully
was-
passed, and
yes.
still vote against.
That's where we're
the
headed.
form.
That's what I was trying to say, is that if there are other items that you want to talk about that might be in a motion to amend, don't hold back.
Okay.
If I sit here long enough, I might think of one. Did you have?
No,
Oh, okay.
no, it's just that we're going so many different directions and adding different components to this that, you know, you could be in favor of including or not including the 2008, but if you don't like the concept of utility, so.
Well, you could
We're doing the amendment
Right.
and then the,
Well, there's no motion been made to amend, but if there were a motion to amend.
if there was.
Don't you like seeing how the sausage is made? Isn't this exciting? Talk about transparency. If there were a motion, there would be a motion, a second, there would be discussion on that, on the motion to amend. And one could theoretically vote against the motion to amend, and yet vote in favor of the amended motion. I got a diagram here. I just followed all
Yeah,
this.
you better, all right, so let's get this
Commissioner
started.
You can tell we don't amend motions very often, but I'm ready to give it a shot.
Go for it.
Mayor Tully, I move to amend the current motion which says to direct staff to implement a stormwater utility to include adding the 2008 bond debt service in the stormwater utility and to further increase the ramp-up period to 15 years as part of the stormwater utility policy.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, any discussion on the, well, no, hold on a second. I also need to ask for public comment at this point in time, because there's a motion to amend the motion that was on the table. So I will open it back up to any public comment with respect to the motion to amend that is now on the table. Is there any public comment or questions with respect to that motion to amend? And then I'll bring it back to the council. On the amendment, this is only on the motion to amend. Okay, then I'll take it back to the council. Any discussion on the motion to amend the motion to direct staff to implement a stormwater utility system in the village of Downers Grove? Commissioner Waldeck.
Okay, we are now talking about the amendment, so I can go along with the amendment, but in doing so, I'm also voting for the utility.
Not necessarily. You would be voting in favor of the amendment. You could still vote against the amended motion to implement a stormwater
Okay.
utility.
Which would be the second vote.
So it's a yes, no.
Correct.
Or
There we
a
go.
yes, yes.
There we go.
Yes.
I'm
could-
sure
could
you
do
would
that.
prefer a yes, yes.
Vote your conscience. Commissioner Schnell.
Okay. As I said earlier, I do prefer staff's original presentation. I am smart enough, however, to know that this is a huge vote for the village of Downers Grove, and I think it will send a clear message to the residents of our community, both commercial and people who actually live here, as to the importance of this particular proposal. Because of that, I will vote for both, simply because I feel strong enough that this is something that we really need to send a clear, undiluted message to the village that as a council, we feel this is something that is extremely important and that needs to move forward. So that is why I'm changing my original set of comments to a very shorter set of comments.
Thank you, Commissioner. Other questions or comments on the motion to amend? Commissioner Barnett.
Just wondering if any of my colleagues have any interest in the idea of a zero net change in year one.
Explain that for those of us who are not.
The proposal, either way, whether it's as amended or as presented in the report, is to have a net increase in total dollars taken in from whatever sources in the first year of the utility as compared to what we're spending out of the general revenue fund prior.
That is correct.
Right.
Either proposal, the one that was presented in the report or the one that's the discussion of this amended motion, results in approximately $1 million more in the first year that we could spend on stormwater. So if I understand,
Well,
Commissioner...
let's clarify that. Will spend on stormwater, not can.
Thank you for the, yeah, that's correct. Was concentrating more on the next part of the statement here
understand.
because I want to make sure I understand from Commissioner Barnett. The zero net impact would be that after the shift of the 08 debt service payments onto the fees would occur, then we would set the fees equal to the same amount of revenue we have in 2012.
Correct.
Is that correct? Okay. If that happens, two things happen. Number one, the fees go back to very close to the same fees that we've been had published for the last 6 months or so. Why? Because under the proposal, it was a $1 million net increase in total revenue, and the debt service payments are about the same number the opposite way. So if you take the amended motion and further amend it to say zero net impact, the numbers kind of go back to what they were before, but we have $1 million less to spend in 2013 than we had proposed. Clear as mud?
No, I understand.
Okay.
The purpose of that is because I shouldn't suppose, wrong choice of words, I shouldn't try and estimate what we might do come levy season. But given the last 2.5 years of my personal involvement, I would be shocked if we said, in addition to whatever personnel costs and general operating costs are driving property taxes, realize we dropped them this year accidentally because of the state. Whatever property tax increases we might be looking at considering for those other purposes, we would be interested in putting another $1.1 million on top of it. I don't see that happening. And so when the question in front of us is kind of, do we want to do a utility or do we want to do property taxes? Then that's kind of what's driving that. I'd be shocked if we all sat up here and said, yeah, we're going to just stick with property taxes, and then we got to next fall and said, let's add another $1.5 million on property taxes just to do stormwater. I don't see us doing that. And so I'm trying to, do a couple things, mitigate and minimize the initial impact on folks as we do this, and that's the extended term, but also to try and get everybody to really understand that this is sort of a marker shift in what we're doing, and then we're going to go forward with the costs associated with doing it. Otherwise, it feels a little bit, bad choice of words, but I'm struggling for others right now, but it feels a little bit like sort of a backdoor way of grabbing a bunch of extra revenue, and that bothers me, because I don't think we'd do that as a council if we were sitting here just talking about property taxes.
Mayor, if I could interject, there is a significant issue on the table if we do the extension of the 15-year ramp up and a net zero in year one. What that does then is it means it takes us significantly longer to actually address the gap. Because if it's zero net impact in the first year, that's $1 million of the gap that we don't achieve. And then if we take a 10-year ramp up and extend it another 5 years, we have not run any of those numbers, and we don't know how that affects our ability to address the gap.
I get the concept, and I think it's a good question. I'm not sure that I got my head wrapped around it enough to be able to say one way or the other. Although I think in layman's terms, what you're really saying is we would almost have 1 year where it would be implemented. We get the thing up and running, but not really anything would change in terms of dollars in or dollars out. They would just be going different places, and it would only be in year 2 that you would start to see the shift.
Right.
Year 1 would be basically just taking this and putting it over there, and we'd have a new system, but nothing would really change in terms of dollars and cents. It would be year 2 where that would start. So that would impact, obviously, everything down the road.
You've got it right.
Don't have a reaction to it one way or the other. I'm just saying I understand it.
Everybody's sort of looking like probably they're not liking that idea.
Well,
I think that we all need a chance to really soak it all in.
Digest it.
Yeah, and think about it.
Some number crunching.
I don't think I'm prepared to make a decision on that issue right now.
But
I do understand it.
I think we've taken a monumental step just putting the 2008 debt service on this thing.
It just concerns me that I wouldn't
understand
see
what
us
you're saying.
acting that way if we were only talking property taxes.
No, I understand what you're saying, and that
Well, and I would hate
it's
for
interesting.
it to extend out projects, us not doing more than we're already not doing. That's my only concern about that.
I mean, if we're somehow selling it to the public that this is going to allow us to do some of the maintenance and do some of the projects that we need to do, and then we have less money because we've instituted it to do the projects that we say we're going to do, it seems like we're sending a mixed message to the public. And again, I think we need some numbers, and I think we need to digest it, but
No, fair question, because I think it was you, Commissioner, said earlier, this is a big deal. This is a very significant policy decision.
huge.
The motion as amended, doesn't preclude that kind of a change, does it?
It does not preclude it. If the motion as amended were to pass, then staff would begin public messaging with the chart that's on the screen now with those fees that are increased and a tax levy that's reduced by another $1.15 million.
And the worst thing that would happen in that message is that, if I understood what you said earlier, we'd be talking about a fee up here, and if this net zero went in place, it would actually be a lower fee.
Right, it would drop back down to very near the proposed fees that have been out there for a long time. However, we have questions, I can hear them from our finance director and our public works director about level of service impacts that we have not modeled.
No, and I understand that, but I'm purely from a messaging standpoint. The worst thing that would come out of it is
That's
somebody
correct.
said $10 and it turned out to be $8.
Correct.
I realize there's a whole bunch of other stuff going on that we don't know the answer yet to. Okay. All right, well, there's a motion to amend the motion that's on the table. Is there any further discussion? Then I will call for a roll call on the motion to amend the motion to direct staff to implement a stormwater utility system in the Village of Downers Grove.
The amended motion. Commissioner Newstead?
Aye.
Commissioner Durkin?
Aye.
Commissioner Rankin?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Aye.
Commissioner Schnell?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. The motion to amend the motion passes unanimously. Now, we need a roll call on the amended motion.
Well, if you want, just a point of clarification, so if you support the one and you want this, you vote yes. If you support that and you don't want it, overall, you vote no.
Correct.
Okay.
So,
Commissioner Newstead?
Aye.
Commissioner Schnell?
Aye.
Commissioner Rankin?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Commissioner Durkin?
Aye.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Nay.
Mayor Tully?
aye. The amended motion passes 6-1. And thus comes to a conclusion about 10 years of discussion. Well, not a conclusion, it's actually just the beginning, isn't it?
Actually, there's probably a lot of folks wondering what the next steps are. The next steps will be broadcast in the next 30 days or so, maybe even the next 2 weeks. Staff will put up some information on our website explaining what you can expect as we aim for a 2013 launch of a stormwater utility. There will be further actions by the Village Council required in terms of approving ordinances, detailed information, et cetera. So really, in a lot of ways, our work is just beginning. Thank you.
Thank you. I know there's a question out in the audience, but we really don't have an opportunity for public comment at this point in time. But well, that was on the motion to amend, and nobody said anything. I don't recall that I said that, but you know what? I will break from protocol if you have a comment, question.
It's too late. Close it.
Just for the record, I think okay. His comment was walking out the door. Then we'll move on to our first reading, item 8 on our agenda. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 items on our first reading. Our first reading segment of our agenda is typically the workshop part of our meeting, where we hear about items for the first time, they're presented for discussion and for action at a later point in time. And as is customary, we turn this part of the meeting over to the village manager.
And I, as my custom, will turn over the first 2 items to our Public Works Director, Nan Newland. The first is an award of a contract for water main improvements.
Good evening again.
Hello again. I have a brief presentation on 2 capital projects for you tonight. The first one is our 2012 water main improvement contract A, which is one of 2 water main replacement contracts this year. This project consists of the replacement of approximately 3,500 feet of 6-inch and 8-inch water mains in the village, the replacement of 45 residential water services up to their B boxes, as well as restoration, including parkways, driveways, sidewalks, and streets. This will be on Lee Avenue from Chicago to Grant, on Snowberry Court, on 40th Street from Sterling to Fairview, as well as 2 water interconnects with existing system, which will help the improvement of, help the flow of our entire system. We did receive 14 bids for this. John Neary Construction Company was the low bidder, and they have satisfactorily completed similar projects for Villa Park as well as Prospect Heights, and staff recommends award of this contract to John Neary Construction Company, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from any members of the audience with respect to this item? Questions or comments from any members of the Village Council? No questions or comments. Next item, please.
The next item is our 2012 resurfacing project, which is classified as Contract A. We do have Contract A and Contract B, which you will be seeing at a near future date. This is a contract with Central Blacktop Company of LaGrange, Illinois, in the amount of $2,071,188.10. This includes resurfacing selected village streets with new asphalt, base repairs, concrete curb and gutter replacement, as well as restoration of parkways and driveways that are affected. This was bid. We did receive 4 bids. Central Blacktop Company was the low bidder, and they have completed for the village the 2006 and 2007 resurfacing contract, and did that work well for the village, and we recommend award to them. And just for your information, other contracts you will see from us in the near future related to road maintenance will include the 2012 preventative seal, Contract B, Washington Street resurfacing, Carpenter Street resurfacing, and the 2012 fall roadway patching contracts. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from the audience with respect to the 2012 resurfacing project? Questions or comments from the Village Council? Commissioner Waldeck.
Thank you, Mayor. The village manager and I discussed this very briefly in our calls. It has to do with this item and the other item. These are funded by the Water Fund and the Capital Projects Fund, and will require money that we're planning on using from bonding.
The item B does not require bonding. Item A, the water main improvements, would be funded by the proceeds from the upcoming bond issuance.
So when we go into this next week, that we appropriately modify the active agenda so that we're actually approving the bonding before we approve the items that require the spending of the money we get from the bonds.
That might be a good idea.
Yes, that was my suggestion. So let's get the money before you spend it.
That would be the reverse of pay-as-you-go, wouldn't it?
I know.
Go as you
Pay as
pay.
you plan.
Go as you pay.
Charge
Questions or comments from the council? Thank you. Next item.
Speaking of the 2012 bond issuance, the next item is an ordinance providing for the issuance of the general obligation bonds for road and water system improvements. This is the 2012 bond issuance that we've been talking about and planning for since at least 2008. And here to present information on this item is our Finance Director, Judy Bundy.
Good evening. Have you recovered from the shock that we gave you?
Barely. Good evening, Mayor and Council. As Dave mentioned, an ordinance has been prepared for the issuance of $35 million in GO bonds, $25 million for road reconstruction, $10 million for the water system. This is consistent with the long-range financial plan and the FY12 budget. This debt issuance will be done as a competitive bid with pricing done next week on Tuesday, April 17th. So the actual interest rate and debt service schedule will be presented to Council that evening. And as a note, Standard & Poor's has affirmed the village's AA+ rating for this debt issuance.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments from any members of the audience with respect to this issuance of general obligation bonds for road and water system improvements? Good evening again.
Good evening again. Tom LeCran, 545 Chicago Avenue. I just have one question. What is our total indebtedness? Because we've got the 2008, now you're talking another 35, there's 7 coming with the water, stormwater utility. What is our bottom line? How much do we owe? And when will it all get paid off? And when are we going to stop doing that? When are we going to spend?
Hold on, 3 questions.
Pay as you go.
Answer the first question is in every budget we put out every year. If I had the time, I'd look it up. I can answer it online. Second question is when the debt payments are due is also in that same document. And there are revenue streams that are dedicated to paying those debt service every year. Right. So
is there
the debt has an amount of revenue that is matched to it, so they're being paid off. And there's a long-range financial plan that calls for all the retirement over a given period of time. Again, it's all in our financial documents that are on our website. I just don't have them right in front of me. And third one is
there any feel to at what
stop
point in
borrowing
time
anything for any reason?
are we not going to issue more debt? Because when these things come down the line, 10 years, 5 years from now, you'll be saying, well, we got a bond out this. I can see us getting to a point where real estate taxes go for debt service and nothing else. Because the debt service doesn't do anything for us.
I think it's important to note a couple things that are key to the long-range financial plan. The strategy is to continue to use bonding for capital improvements that are of a large magnitude, generally over $1 million or $2 on each project. More importantly, our strategy calls for us to maintain a moderate debt service level, and it calls for us to use the existing revenue sources, at least at this point. So that's the concept. We do have a strategy in place to make sure that the things that Mr. LeCrenne are talking about, the sort of out-of-control debt service payment, is not going to happen. We're going to remain
Commissioner
moderate.
Durkin would probably say that the debt rating agencies, bond rating agencies look exactly at that. In fact, they focus in on like a laser beam, and it affects whether they give you the rating that we have right now or not. So that's obviously something that we're very cognizant of, because you don't want to get out of kilter, because that will affect your financial stability, the outlook, and your ratings from S&P.
Correct. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Barnett?
Just on that point, we have had a graph presented to us in each long-range financial plan session that was a bar chart that described that, and one of the points that was trying to be made that might be good to remind everybody, if we could make that more readily available on the website in case somebody wants to ask the question, but it points to the strategy of being a level number. There's
Correct.
anticipated future issuances that coincide with existing drop-offs, and that's an important. These things are such long-term payout or paybacks that it's easily lost on what's dropping off at the same time that we're adding stuff, and I think it'd be helpful for everybody to realize that.
We will provide the links from this agenda item to that information on the website, so it's readily available.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments with respect to the general obligation bonds for road and water system improvements from the public? Any questions from the council? Commissioner Newstead.
Just to back up what Commissioner Barnett said and Dave said, Mr. LeCrenne, there is a great spot right in the long-range financial planning document that has that bar graph that Commissioner Barnett said. So we'll get it in with the green sheets for next week, but if you want to look at it ahead of time, it's right there.
And I think we really drop off in the 20s.
Correct.
2020 or 2021, we really drop off.
That's correct.
Significant. And that's where we were having a discussion, do we do 30 million or do we do 50 million or 75 million? And where I came up with structuring the bond payments later and not up front or equal over the 30 years or 40 years. So
that's correct.
Other questions or comments from the council on this item? Commissioner Waldeck.
Thank you. No surprise to anybody. I've been consistent on this one. And I've had the opposition to borrowing the $25 million for the capital projects. When council raised the $500,000 in taxes, that comes out to about $20 a year on an average house. Council was all apologetic, knowing that times were tough. Council did it again the following year and did so reluctantly. And then the following year, we reduced the tax holes by $300,000. And we were very happy to take appropriate credit for that. But now we're talking about payments of $1.6 million a year and about $14 million going all to interest. That's 28 times as much, or $560 going to not fixing anything. So if we were talking about a single one-and-done project, maybe we could talk about rising costs of construction and interest rates. But infrastructure improvement and maintenance is an ongoing, it's as ongoing as long as there's a Downers Grove. We do know that after we spend the $25 million on the projects, we'll be left with about 9 years of interest payments and hundreds of years of projects. So we can't stop doing projects because the infrastructure is an ongoing demand. Because we can't close up shop, we will, while we are still paying off the debt, need to borrow money at probably higher rates of interest and higher construction costs. And alternatively, and what I prefer is if we don't borrow the money, we can start more projects, maybe 9 years earlier, at probably lower interest rates and/or construction costs. But we have to bite the bullet now and plan what we can do with $1.6 million per year. When we start to borrow for ongoing maintenance, we begin a process, and it's been brought up, I think it's called laddering, whether you're borrowing or lending, When we start to borrow for ongoing maintenance, we begin a process where we have to keep borrowing and paying off, each time spending millions of dollars on interest. $14 million this time, maybe more next time. And how easy is it to get off the ritual of borrowing money for capital projects? Well, they're not one and done. We'll keep borrowing the money because we can. Staff will break out the chart showing the debt and how much more we can borrow. And each bond will cost us about $14 million or maybe more, and each bond will set us back 9 or 10 years in projects. So if we took a planned approach as pay-as-you-go, we can avoid millions of dollars in interest passed on to the taxpayer and put that money to projects so we could possibly start earlier than planned. I understand the reasoning on both sides, and I just happen to be a proponent of the pay-as-you-go, and I think the sooner we get started on that, the better for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Other questions or comments from members of the council on the general obligation bonds? Next item, please.
And finally tonight is consideration of what shows up on the agenda as an agreement between the village and the American Legion Post for their Memorial Day parades. But the Legion has actually withdrawn that request, and they are now simply seeking a fee waiver for their 2012 Memorial Day parade. Staff recommends action at the discretion of the council, and I'm actually going to turn this item over to the mayor, who's had discussions with the Legion on this item.
Well, thank you, Dave. I appreciate that and appreciate the opportunity to talk about it. Very quickly, the background on this is that obviously we have been quite fortunate for many years in the Village of Downers Grove to have the National Day of Observance, Memorial Day, celebrated and respected in a number of different ways, including a parade as well as a ceremony that takes place here in town. Actually, there's a couple of ceremonies that take place here in town, and they're quite remarkable, and would encourage anyone who's not attended one to certainly do so, because they are quite impactful. Last year, the American Legion Post 80, located here in Downers Grove, of course, did not hold its traditional Memorial Day parade because of construction that was going on at Fishel Park. So they actually held their ceremony somewhere else. It was at the Legion Post site, actually. It was a gorgeous day, as I recall. But they would like, now that Fishel Park construction is concluded, and there's a nice new band shell there, gorgeous band shell, actually, to return to the traditional parade down Main Street, which ends at Fishel Park, where the observance ceremony is taking place. So last year we didn't have this issue, and in the interim there were some changes to policies here in the village with respect to permit fees, and so this issue arose for the first time when the American Legion requested permission to have a parade down our Main Street to Fishel Park, which of course is a long-standing tradition here in Downers Grove, and there was a little bit of a collision between the parade and the change in the permit fees. And this raised a number of different issues, which I'm sure some of my colleagues will comment on, about what fees should be charged to what organizations for what events, what is the event, who is the organization, what is the purpose, and obviously there are a lot of different policy issues that go into that, and we could certainly hold a robust discussion on the topic at some point in time. Given the advent of Memorial Day, one suggestion that I made to address the issue and not necessarily foreclose the policy discussion, but to not bring it to the forefront where now it required the time and investment to iron it out on a broader basis. And it certainly isn't the only way to do this. It was just the one that happened to occur to me, is that we entered into an arrangement or an agreement with the American Legion to provide the parade. Because certainly they're doing the parade not for any fundraising purposes. They're doing it to observe and to respect and to acknowledge the supreme sacrifices of our military men and women. But the idea was that we would actually enter an arrangement where they would hold the parade for a certain number of years, and because of the agreement there would be no permit fee, because it was essentially something that was a celebratory event, much like our Independence Day parade, which, by the way, we don't charge ourselves a fee for that either. That was the idea, and initially there was some support for it, but as people thought more about it, I understand that there's been some thought, well, maybe we ought to just actually talk about the broader issues involved and not just the one that's raised by this particular event, and that's fine. So I think the Legion, being the very smart men and women that they are, realized that, well, maybe that we don't need to do the agreement, because there's going to be a discussion on the broader policy. So I understand that they originally were fine with the idea, but now sort of want to pull back and see what happens, which is fine. I think I can go out on a ledge here and say that I don't think any of us are in favor of charging what would be about a $700 fee to the American Legion for holding a remembrance parade for celebrating Memorial Day and ending up in Fishel Park. I don't think that was the intention of the original policy change. But we do have, as a consequence of that, probably need to have a discussion about some broader policy issues. So we're not talking about a lot of money here. And obviously this is a very important, somber, celebratory event, and we want to respect and support it, as well as the American Legion. But we also have some broader policy issues to discuss. So that's a long-winded description of the background and why we're talking about this, and why this proposed contract got on the agenda. As the manager has mentioned, the Legion is no longer interested in the agreement because they want to see how the policy discussion turns out. I don't blame them. So that's where we're at. So I've made the introduction. That's the history. I will open it up to, I guess, questions or comments from the audience, and then questions or comments from members of the council. So the item that's actually on the agenda for questions or comments is the agreement. I don't know if anybody has any burning questions about that, but if anyone has any questions or comments about the subject matter generally, I think we'll bend the rules a little bit. Be happy to take any questions or comments, or if there are none, I will open it up to my colleagues to weigh in. Hearing no questions or comments from the audience. Questions or comments from the Village Council. Commissioner Barnett.
Thank you, Mayor. I think I first learned about this 2 weeks or so ago, and at that time I suggested a change to our policy that was pretty narrow and focused only on the veterans. I think the subject needn't be reopened as a general subject. I think this was sort of an accidental group that got caught in a net that was cast broadly 2 years ago. And the distinctions that this group has from everybody else are pretty clear and pretty easily defined. We're talking about a group of folks who are part of an organization not because that's what they want to do with their free time this year, but because that's what they did with their lives to protect ours. They are not the same as any other organization in town in that aspect. The activities that they're wanting to do are, as you mentioned, Mayor, not fundraising, but furthermore, they're really not even self-promoting or recruiting or anything along those lines. They are celebratory and assembly-related things that I think that, I'm perfectly happy to sit up here and say that I want to exempt them and not others. I feel that way. I feel pretty strongly about it. Had the agreement been on the agenda tonight, I was not looking forward to that, because it's this parade is something that they choose to do. The other sort of sideline issue relative to flag burning is another one that, we can certainly waive that every year if we choose to, but I don't believe that we intend, any of us, for our policy to suggest that we want to charge these folks to do this stuff. So I would suggest to my colleagues that we should just go ahead and make the change to our policy right now that exempts the wording that I presented last week. Mary, if you'll just let me kind of throw it out there. I know it's not exactly a ordinance wording kind of a thing, but narrowly defines veterans organizations chartered by or accredited by the Congress of the United States or the U.S. Government Department of Foreign Affairs or of Veterans Affairs. That's a narrow scope, and we're not talking about building permits. If any of these groups want to redo their buildings, or if they want to put a fundraiser downtown on Main Street for some other event, we're talking about celebratory assembly kinds of things for a very discreet group, and I'd propose we just make that change and I'll be done with it.
And then waive the fee under the new policy.
The policy change would be to exempt those organizations and those kinds of activities from fees.
Are you going to do a straw poll?
I was going to let you speak first.
Oh, I support what Bob's recommendation is, or suggestion. I agree it was something that got captured into a large net, and I think it's time we just address it once and for all and be done with it.
Commissioner Schnell?
I think we should exempt them, whether we go this route or go the route of going back to community events and having just reviewed the whole policy. I can go either way. Bottom line is I think they should be exempt.
Well, yeah, I don't think anybody's suggesting that they get charged for
right. And just in the sideline, I think it's also my understanding that we do not charge them for the permit for the flag burning, correct?
Flag retirement. not flag
Retirement.
burning.
The flag retirement.
Retirement, sorry.
The flag retirement fee is waived. The fee is waived under the fee waiver policy. It has nothing to do with the community event policy. So yes, we waive it every year at the staff level.
When it comes to flag burning, we have a motto. You're perfectly happy and free to burn the flag, but we just ask that you wrap yourself in it first. You're supposed to laugh.
Okay, it was the wrong choice of
Flag
words.
retirement ceremony.
Wrong choice of words, I take it
Eric
back.
Lee does with worn out
That's all
flags, it's
I
done very.
understand that. And they do it with respect. They do it with respect.
Couplers,
Yes.
they
But there's-
recycle
They
those.
follow the protocol.
Yes.
Understand.
Service they provide to the
Mailbox or
community.
collection boxes outside.
Commissioner
the post
Newstead.
office.
Thank you, Mayor. Going back 2 years ago when we did have this policy discussion at community events, I was the chairman, and frankly, we did miss it. It wasn't something that we considered when we cast that net of not-for-profits. And then as we've heard today, having not had Official Park ready for the ceremony last year, that's why we're at the point we're at now. So I think it's very important to note, though, that if their village fees are indeed exempted or waived, the temporary use permit still needs to be applied for, and that process needs to be gone through, so the appropriate village services are indeed in place for things like a parade or any other
Yes.
ceremonial services. So if we do craft some language to go along with the federally chartered or accredited veterans organizations, we should also include that as part of the language, and I would then be able to support that. Because we do need to make sure that
Right.
the roadways and the parade routes are safely.
Right, well, I think what, if I understand it correctly, and obviously we don't have the language in front of us, but it's not too difficult to envision, what Commissioner Barnett is proposing is simply there would be a line that said that this particular defined organization would be exempt from the fee aspect, but everything else would remain the same.
Correct.
That's correct. I think we've captured it in the Green Chandler option 2. Worked with Commissioner Barnett in drafting that language, so that's not the ordinance language, but it certainly captures all the concepts.
Right, right. Thus, not difficult to envision. Commissioner Rankin?
I think the community event policy is obviously not a one-size-fits-all policy, so I'm in support of amending that. The one thing I would like to say is for the flag retirement, I don't think we should have this group come and apply and then have to ask for a waiver every year. That just seems like not good customer service to me. If we're going to say that they're exempt, then we're just going to say that.
It's actually
from the fee portion.
That's actually a different policy, and the way it actually works is our staff actually fills out the form for them. We just have them sign it, and then so we made it as customer friendly as possible, and we do waive it.
Why do we have to do that?
It's for record keeping and to make sure we're following our policy. We keep track of.
We have an open burning policy.
Yeah.
Okay, well, there's sense, so there's a reason for it.
Yes.
To me, it doesn't make any sense at all if we're
Right.
paying someone to fill out a form that we know we're not going to retain.
Right, we actually work with them to
revenue
make sure
from.
it's done properly and pursuant to our own open burning permits, et cetera. And we do an inspection.
Okay.
So there's a reason.
There's still
Yes.
public safety aspects, but it's the fee that has traditionally been waived.
And I just, being part of the Community Events Commission, I don't think that it needs to go back there. I just think it's going to have more people debating the same issue. I think we should just make a decision and move forward.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Waldeck.
Thank you, Mayor. It's been actually over the last several weeks that council has been inundated with complaints from the American Legion when they found out that they might have to pay for holding the event, the Memorial Day Parade. And I agreed with them. I said that it is a very bad policy, and I never supported it because it was bad for the community and it was divisive. I also explained that while I support them in getting fees waived for the parade, that in doing so we were continuing a policy of encouraging special interest groups where influence in politics could play a role. A bad policy would be allowed to continue whenever a sizable opposition could be specially treated. Many of them justified the waiver because of the groups they serve, and they provided a list of those groups as justification. The problem is that many of these groups wanted to, if any of those groups wanted to have an event, they would be charged as well. And I wrote that I would have preferred if a group like the Legion would lead the way in putting an end to a policy rather than seeking a separate treatment. And I approve of the method that they've come forth with. The e-sheets that you look at tonight state that says that the village values the Memorial Day Parade. We do. and we should, but a continuation of the policy means that we value other expressions of religion, public service, or community spirit less. We have already indicated that we value business more. This all stems from a few years ago when the majority of council took us down a path of core services ideology where it was police, fire, and public works only. There was no room for the community spirit, patriotism, neighbors helping neighbors, just wasn't our concern. At our very basic municipal level of government, we went from being a free market economy to a free market society, where every aspect of our society and its local government has turned into a business transaction. Pay up and you can help feed the hungry. Pay up and you can help demonstrate your religious event or try to cure some dreaded disease or social problem. Pay up and we can together demonstrate patriotism. We need to end this free market societal problem and have an event policy that allows for community and a village government that reflects the community spirit and not just a business transaction. Therefore, option 1 is off the table. Option 2, which is what they're talking about tonight, I think it's still divisive. What was it in the veterans or our troops fighting? What were the veterans and troops fighting for? Was it religious freedom? Was it right to protest bad government? While our men and women were fighting for freedom and the oppressed, the other countries they were fighting were ignoring their infirm, they're starving. They were killing and imprisoning people that we were trying to help in this country. Or were they fighting for the preservation of core services or free market society? I support option 3, which is indeed a waiver for this group, for this parade this year and ongoing. I do support them and their efforts. But we also need to dump the policy, and I support reviewing a policy that respects sense of community, freedom of expressing patriotic, religious, or public service. And if you like the mission of the groups that have been charged fees or are subject to fees like the Legion, you would see if you looked at those mission statements of the groups that we're charging, you would see that they are all involved in public service, youth, crisis services, and the only group to get a waiver so far has been the one that's designed to gain profits for business. All I can say is that we need to change this policy, and it should be reviewed by the events committee so that we come up with something that makes sense. Or are we going to wait until we find another group that fell in the cracks that we weren't planning on and create yet another special group? So I would go with option 3, and I do fully support the waiver. Thank you.
Other questions or comments from the council on this item? You're dying to say something.
I'm keeping my mouth shut.
I'll just, my views on it are clearly, and every single one of us is of the mind that we're not going to charge the American Legion Post to hold the Memorial Day parade. That much nobody ever intended. That wasn't even the issue. But you can see some of the other issues of this, rightfully or wrongfully, can open up. My thought was, I agree. I think that you can easily say that this is a very unique and distinct situation. We're talking about a celebratory, observatory, national holiday conducted in a manner that is not designed to self-promote or raise any funds whatsoever. And you'd be hard-pressed to find somebody else that falls into that mold. I also liken it more to the Independence Day parade that we hold here as a village, and that's led to the thinking of, well, if we were to outsource the Independence Day parade, for example, we wouldn't be charging fees to whoever it was that we asked to do that. Isn't this kind of like that kind of arrangement with the American Legion? I don't particularly think it's the only way to handle it. It was just a way to handle it. Although I continue to disagree with my colleague to the right with respect to the Downtown Management Corporation, because there we do have an agreement with an entity and we're obligating them to do something, so it makes absolutely no sense to charge them a fee for doing what it is that we ask them to do. If they're doing our bidding, it doesn't make any sense to charge them, but I understand that there are disagreements on that as well. As you can see, all of this was originally designed to try to avoid this very discussion. I don't have any problem with amending the policy to carve out the American Legion and the Memorial Day Parade, because I do agree it is very unique. However, I do think we're going to see future requests for such similar treatment. Someone will have right now is probably furiously figuring out their own unique definition, and we're going to hear about this again. That's my only concern. But obviously, I'm in support of a waiver, so if we can accomplish that by waiving and then amending the policy, so we don't have to waive it every year, that's fine. Hopefully that's sufficient direction.
Yes, it is, Mayor. You'll see this next week on an active agenda, and that ends our first reading agenda.
Terrific. Thank you. Brings us to item 9 on our agenda, which is the mayor's report, and I have one thing on that item, which is always under the mayor's report, which is the periodic update in respect to ComEd reliability and our continuing efforts to work with ComEd and enhance and ensure reliability of electricity service in the village of Downers Grove. Of course, this all stemmed from the remarkable and extraordinary storms of last summer, which caused some unprecedented power outages. We had a town hall meeting which sort of kicked all this off with ComEd representatives, and we pledged to continue to work with them and update our residents as to our efforts to improve and enhance reliability of electrical service. With that introduction, this week's update is as follows. The final 2 projects that were identified during the reliability review last fall are currently underway. These 2 projects are on schedule to be completed by the end of this summer, 2012, which is consistent with the timeline that ComEd submitted to the village in September of 2011. ComEd is also adding an additional equipment upgrade project in Downers Grove, consisting of the replacement of 4,400 feet of underground cable in the circuit serving the area near 63rd and Main Street. This project is part of the infrastructure upgrades provided under the Smart Grid bill and is planned for the second half of 2012. Village staff is in contact with ComEd to determine when this project will begin, and as always, we'll post updates and additional information on the village website. I think we have a sort of a permanent area on the website that contains information regarding what's going on with ComEd and our reliability efforts. Well, that ends the report on the ComEd update. Brings us to item 10, which is the manager's report.
No report tonight, Mayor.
No report tonight. Village attorney report.
Mayor, I only have one item to present tonight, and that's an ordinance providing for the issuance of the general obligation bonds for road and water system improvements. That is all. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much. This brings us to item 12, council member reports on new business. Bless you. Start with Commissioner Barnett.
I have nothing, Mayor.
Commissioner Durkin.
Yeah, just a mini commercial for our April 21st Coffee with the Council. It's going to be taking place at Oak Trace Retirement Community, which is located at 200 Village Drive, which is right across the street from the new subdivision that we've just voted on tonight off of Fairview, and I think that's 65th Street. It'll start at 9 o'clock. I actually was there this afternoon for lunch with the Noon Lions Club, and some of the residents were still inquiring if I was going to be there, and I told them that not only me, but a number of our council, including the mayor and staff, so they're excited, and I think it's going to be one of the top coffees that we're going to have this year that are going to be extremely hard to top going down out in the future. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Commissioner Schnell.
I have nothing.
Commissioner Waldeck.
I have nothing.
Commissioner Rankin.
I have nothing.
Commissioner Newstead.
Thank you, Mayor. The 4th Annual Downers Grove Public Library Foundation Mini Golf Event returns on Sunday, April 15th, of course, at the Downers Grove Public Library. Patrons of all ages can tee off anytime between 11 a.m. and 4 p.m. Tournament play begins at 4:15 for teens and adults, or for teens and kids who qualify. Tickets are $5 for adults and $3 for ages 12 and younger. There's a lot of great sponsors, and I think I'm going to attend this year for the first time, but I've heard it's a great event and a great highlight for our Downers Grove Public Library. And the Public Library has begun to use QR codes around the library for information delivery to its patrons. Thank you, Mayor. That's all I have tonight.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. I appreciate that. Just a couple things really quickly. Number one, just want to congratulate William McAdam is the new Executive Director of the Downers Grove Park District. Of course, Mr. McAdam takes the place of Dan Cermak, who has long served the village of Downers Grove and the Downers Grove area as the Director of the Downers Grove Park District. So it's both a time to thank Dan for his long and dedicated service and appreciate all that he's done, as well as welcome his successor, and I know we'll have an opportunity to do so pretty soon, so we look forward to that. And we congratulate the Downers Grove Park District on reaching the end of their search in a very successful manner. And the last thing I have to say is that, of course, there are in fact only 71 days left until the Rotary Growth Fest. I can almost taste the elephant ears now. I have nothing further to report, so with that, I will ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Schnell?
Aye.
Commissioner Durkin?
Aye.